Hey, what's up guys, Jaeky here. So some of you may have recently noticed that I've actually switched back to my Zowie 600Hz TN monitor for Valorant. This is Zowie's flagship monitor, the XL2586X Plus, which is a 1080p 24-inch 600Hz TN panel. And I wanted to make a quick video basically just explaining why I switched back to my 600Hz and the experience I've had with it compared to OLED. So obviously a while ago I made a video comparing my OLED monitor to the Zowie 600Hz monitor, and if you want to check out that full video, I'll leave it linked in the description below. But I still stand by most of what I said in that video. If you are somebody who plays a lot of AAA title games and you're not really a mainly competitive shooter player and you do a lot of content creation or a lot of content consumption with your computer, then I would still recommend getting an OLED monitor. OLED monitors are a great all-rounder if you play AAA titles as well as some competitive games on the side as well. However, the reason why I'm currently using my 600Hz over my OLED is because my main focus is Valorant. So in the original video, I talked about how the motion clarity on the 600Hz Zowie monitor is better than the OLED, mainly because of backlight strobing, which is DyAc 2 on the Zowie monitor. This basically strobes the backlight of the monitor, which makes motion clarity on the Zowie monitor extremely clear, even when compared to a high refresh rate OLED. So the benefits of using DyAc 2 is that you don't get as much brightness reduction compared to other backlight strobing methods. Zowie has really perfected their DyAc 2 where you really won't even notice any brightness reduction when you have the setting turned on, which is great. So in that sense, the brightness on my Zowie monitor has been a lot brighter than my OLED. Another reason why I'm using the 600Hz monitor currently is because of the form factor. So for competitive shooters like CS or Valorant, I actually preferred the 24-inch form factor. And the reason for this is because you don't have to move your eyes as much when you're glancing for information, such as up at your minimap. And what I did when I was using my 27-inch OLED is I would just push the monitor back. But the downside of that is that the player models look a lot smaller compared to when I'm using a 24-inch monitor and having it closer to my face. The player models look larger, and also I get the benefit of not having to move my eyes as far in order to get information. So that's another big reason why I am currently maining the 600Hz is because of that 24-inch form factor. Another reason, which sounds kind of silly, is actually because it's 1080p. I actually prefer 1080p for competitive shooters like Valorant and CS, and one of the reasons is because of the way crosshairs look. If you watched my original video, you would know that one of my complaints about switching over to 1440p is actually the crosshairs looking different on 1440p compared to 1080p. And in my opinion, I just prefer the way crosshairs look, especially the thickness 2 dot in Valorant on a 1080p monitor. Now, obviously, 1440p is superior for pretty much everything else. Desktop browsing, just having that extra workspace for editing as well is something that I've noticed that I've kind of been missing from 1440p, and just the fact that playing any other game like a battle royale like Fortnite or Apex Legends, just being on 1440p makes it a lot more easy to spot enemies because everything is just so much more clear. But for specifically TAC FPS, I do prefer 1080p. Obviously, the Zowie is extremely good for ergonomics. The monitor stand on the Zowie here is probably one of the best monitor stands that you can get in terms of adjustability. You also have different markings on the back as well, so that you can get the same settings every time. This is great if you are constantly moving your monitor around to different environments. Let's say you're going to LAN tournaments. This is an extremely useful feature to have to ensure that you always get the same settings on your monitor. Speaking of settings, another really convenient thing about the Zowie monitor, which I didn't think I would miss as much as I did, is actually this puck right here, which allows you to save 3 different profiles on your monitor and switch between them on the fly. This is actually something I missed on my OLED because when I'm gaming in Valorant compared to browsing on my desktop, I actually like to use different levels of saturation and contrast. Obviously, I can change this in the OLED monitor settings anytime that I boot up the game, but with the Zowie monitor, I'm able to actually just save 2 different profiles onto this puck, one being my desktop profile, which I just use to browse regularly, and then the other being my gaming profile, which I use when I'm playing Valorant. So yeah, that's something I really like about the 600Hz Zowie monitor, which I didn't think I would actually miss as much as I did. So obviously the motion clarity is top class on the Zowie XL2586X Plus because of that 600Hz combined with the DyAc 2 strobing. However, there is something to mention which you've probably noticed if you've been paying attention to the gameplay in the background, and that's the fact that my computer can't even hit 600 frames consistently most of the time. Especially in gunfights where a lot of abilities are going off, it's pretty hard to keep a consistent 600 FPS. And my specs are pretty good. I have a 7800X3D with 32GB of DDR5 RAM and a 4070 Ti. Now, my computer isn't completely optimized, but even if it was, and even if I did upgrade to, let's say, a 9800X3D, I still wouldn't be able to hit 600 frames consistently in heavy gunfights. But when I am in the Valorant range, I do get around 1000 FPS, and a lot of people have asked me whether or not I notice a difference from 360Hz to 600Hz. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a major difference, like upgrading from 60Hz to 240Hz, for example, because that's a huge jump. And obviously the difference between 360Hz to 600Hz is less. However, it's not completely unnoticeable. I do notice a difference from 360Hz moving to 600Hz. There is that extra smoothness that makes it look almost like real life looking out a window. That's how I've heard a lot of different reviewers describe the feeling, is basically looking out a window, and I gotta say it's pretty accurate because the amount of smoothness that there is on the screen, even on the desktop when I first switched over to 600Hz, just moving my mouse cursor around on the desktop, I was able to feel a noticeable difference compared to my 360Hz monitor. Obviously, this monitor comes in at an eye-watering price of $1,000 USD. And for what this monitor is, I don't think it's worth getting for most people. However, if you are in that top 0.1% and you want to squeeze that extra little bit of performance out of your gameplay, I think the Zowie XL2586X Plus is worth getting for those who aspire to be at the very top of their game. However, if your main focus is competitive FPS and you are on a budget, I would actually recommend looking at Zowie's other monitors, such as their 400Hz, which comes in at a much more reasonable price. So my original thoughts of this monitor still remain true. I think it's a very niche monitor for those who are at the top of their game and they are just looking to improve as much as they can with top of the line peripherals and money isn't an issue for them, then this is definitely a monitor that's worth looking into for those specific people, because this monitor is still at the top when it comes to motion clarity. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my thoughts on the Zowie 600Hz monitor and the reason why I'm currently using it. I hope this video helps you guys out, and if it did, make sure you leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.